cherry supplementation. This is actually my second time presenting for MVMT. And the first time I did it was like 20 coaches that I was presenting for. So it's pretty awesome how much we've built since, I don't even know when that was, November 2019 maybe, up to over 100 coaches now. But the first thing that I want to do is I want you to scroll over the chat function, click on that chat, and I want you to do one of two things. So I'm sure many of you have heard about Tart cherry supplementation before. In 1 to 4 words, all lowercase letters, I want you to put why you think the supplement could be useful, for what purpose. Or secondly, if you have recommended it for a client on future, put it in all caps, one sentence, and tell me why you recommended it to them. I'll give you a minute. Nice. Thank you, Ariana, Kyle, Lauren, Sam on recovery. Thank you. Gout. That was a good one, Michaela. That was like an X factor. Thank you. Thank you. Immune system. Good one, KG. Sleep. Thank you, Haley. KG, I thought you were going to do sleep because you were the sleep expert on our IG live like a year and a half ago. Great, great. Thank you so much for all of your participation. Sharing the screen now. Just got to find that. All right, it is shared now, correct? Beautiful. All right, so we'll dive in. So tart cherry supplementation. I called it tart cherry supplementation rather than like tart cherry juice, which is probably what most people know it as, just because there's different forms of it. So I wanted to make sure I didn't generalize, and we'll talk about those different forms as we go throughout this presentation. So what are tart cherries? And the main reason I wanted to do this presentation was because it's an antioxidant-rich fruit with a diverse range of benefits that can really help clientele of all different training backgrounds. And we're going to see that through the different benefits that we talk about, that this can somehow reach almost all of our clients on some level. So tart versus sweet cherries, if you do look into the research, you're going to see that there is a good amount of research looking at the benefits of sweet cherries as well. And they're actually pretty similar, except with tart cherries, the results are a little more robust, which is why its popularity has gained throughout the past 10, 15 years. The forms of supplementation, as I alluded to, there's going to be different forms, and we'll talk about as we go throughout the different studies. And there's minimal adverse effects. So if the benefits can reach all our different clients with that risk reward being super low, it's something that we can really use and keep in the back pocket. So what can I use tart cherry juice with my clients for? And kind of what are we going to be going over today? So aerobic performance, resistance training, recovery as a sleep aid, cardiovascular health. And then something I want to note is that I'm only using human studies. Since this is for the betterment of our clients, I think it's better if the delivery of it is with human studies only. There are a ton of studies on animal models, but if I'm presenting to someone who's 50 something years old, on this rat study show that we can improve your cardiovascular health, that delivery is just going to be better if I found this study in 50 plus, decreasing your blood pressure, whatever the case may be. So aerobic activity, I found this quote in one of the studies: long distance running can cause acute muscle damage, resulting in acute inflammation and decrease the force, sorry, I'm covered there. Decrease in force that can last up to 1 week post-exercise. If we really put this into practice, and I know a lot of us have had clients who have done half marathons, Spartan races, and even athletes who maybe are participating in their sport as well. If soreness is lasting for 1 week post-exercise, post-event, that's going to take a huge toll, especially if it's an athlete in season. Maybe a coach wants to rest them for the whole week because they're sore. There's somebody that's getting more points for the team. Or our Gen Pop clients that are training for those marathon Spartan races. What is 1 week of really muscle damage going to do to them? And a lot of times it's, I'm just going to rest and give it a week, give it till next week, take this week off. But for their activity, what's happening in their body with that week off? Their stroke volume within 72 hours starts to decrease. So within those 72 hours, there's less blood per beat from their heart going out. And just think about less efficiency of the heart is going to be decreased running efficiency as you go through as well, and decreased overall performance. So if we can recommend something to decrease the muscle damage, inflammation, and keep them going, to keep their bodies fresh, it can be a real game changer. So the first study looked at a mountain challenge. This took place in Oregon. And by mountain challenge, I literally mean in the mountains. So it was a mixed terrain, inclines, declines, flat ground with an average distance of 16.3 miles. What did they see? Well, less pain in the Tart Cherry group compared to placebo following the event, and a higher efficiency to continue Tart Cherry supplementation. What kind of makes this a good finding is that this was a double blind study. So neither the participants nor the researchers knew who had what, but even given this, you took this supplement, how did you feel? Well, it was in the direction of the people that did take the Tart Cherry juice, said whatever this was, it made me feel better and I would continue taking it. And this was a juice supplement. So it was 100% tart cherry juice that they were taking. And we'll talk more on forms and dosages as we continue to work through. Next was a half marathon. And one of the biggest results from any studies that I read was a 13% faster race time in the tart cherry group compared to the placebo group, which is a huge difference for an endurance event. There's decreased perceived soreness prior to the event. After both groups had increased levels of soreness, obviously from running a half marathon, but those levels were lower in the tart cherry group. 29% less of a cortisol increase, 43% less inflammatory markers, and a positive antioxidant and hormonal levels that lasted 24 hours later. And a lot of this research goes 48 and even 4 days, we'll see, deeper post exercise. And those levels carry over, for the most part, at least 48 hours, not just 24. The supplement in this case was in the form of a powder and a capsule. A full marathon, we see that there's actually an increase in retainment of strength. So you have your decreased strength afterwards, and they looked at isometric force of the quadriceps, and the force pre-race went back to pre-race levels following the race faster in the tart cherry group than the placebo group. So a better retainment of strength and also decrease in inflammatory markers like IL-6 and C-reactive protein. With those two also kind of came a combined decrease in upper respiratory symptoms as well due to that decrease in inflammation. Biking, they saw in an endurance event that VO2 was 4% lower for a given intensity going through. So that requirement of VO2 was less in the tart cherry group compared to the placebo. And also retainment of strength, again, that the quadriceps really being the kind of main factor in fatigue during biking, that retainment of strength came back faster, and there was also less decrements from the race as well. So what are the mechanisms for this? Anthocyanin, which is really the main one that we're going to talk about as we go through all the different benefits. It's the primary anti-inflammatory driver within all the substances that we find within tart cherry juice. It'll limit the COX-2 pathway for inflammation and is one of the main drivers for that decreased inflammation. And I like to think of miles when I put this one. So phenolic acids, we find it in the seeds and skins of different fruits and vegetables. And if you talk to Miles about nutrition, he always preaches whole foods to get the main benefits from it. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to address here is if we're doing something like a concentrate, well, how exactly was that obtained? Because if it's just strictly the juice and we didn't get the skins, we might not get those full benefits from it. Gallic acids, which is just more antioxidant properties, and then sorbitol. And this is kind of a reverse. So this is something that actually made one client drop out. And through all the studies that I'm going to go over today, not just aerobic, but resistance training, sleep, only one subject dropped out due to the supplement itself. And this was possibly due to the sorbitol content in it, which can cause some GI distress. So if you have somebody that you know has a weak stomach, maybe we go with the pill form to try it out, or slowly dosing in the juice itself, just so that they don't have that GI distress to take them away from their sport, their activity. Resistance training. So since this is a supplement that really helps with inflammation and muscle damage, we have some 10 by 10 protocols, 2 with back squat, 70% of 1 RM, 1 leg knee extension at 80% 1 RM. And what did they find? Well, decreased pain and soreness. And I put the asterisk there because authors don't always state what exactly they mean by that. It's very subjective, right? So the delivery to the subject has to be pretty direct and consistent. So they don't say if there's a difference between pain and soreness. And it does seem that when they reference a pain scale, which is usually a visual analog scale, it seems to be more of a soreness scale rather than that actual pain. And we know that we have had clients where, they don't know that difference between soreness and pain. So it's just something to consider as you do go through maybe recommending it to a client or sifting through the research. There's decreased hepatic and catabolic stress, less strength decrements, just like anaerobic performance. And we saw that in flexion and extension, and also retainment of force following the protocol. The flexion extension was isokinetic, and the retainment of force was via isometric testing. The protocols for these of supplementation were the pill for back squat and concentrate for leg extension. Then researchers looked at eccentric exercise. If you look at eccentric versus concentric, we see a little more muscle damage with eccentric exercise, which really makes it a good study here for tart cherry juice. So they looked at a 2x20 protocol of eccentric contractions of elbow flexors. What did they find? Well, as far as 4 days later, they saw a decrease in strength increments. So getting back to full strength following the protocol, they were 4% less at the tart cherry juice group and 22% in the placebo group. So 4 days later, and we think of our clients, which we have many on 4-day programs, hitting each muscle group twice a week. If our strength is decreased 4 days later, we're probably not going to be able to move as much, right? Now, what does that mean for a lot of clients who have body comp and hypertrophy goals? Well, if that volume load is lower because we're sore, well, they might not get those results, which really makes us a good supplement for them to take. Mechanisms, less cortisol, almost half the amount in the tart cherry group compared to the placebo, and an enhanced cortisol to testosterone ratio. Now, what does this mean? Like, cortisol is going to come up regardless. It's a natural response to exercise, and often it gets a bad rap. If it goes up at all, then something's wrong. Well, it's not necessarily true. We're going to get that response because the inflammation is going to trigger that cortisol. That cortisol is going to trigger some neutrophils to come in and attack that inflammation, heal that spot of muscle damage. But if it's less cortisol coming up, well, maybe now there's perceived physiological stress from exercise on the body. So although there's still cortisol in there, it's less of a response, but your body is still going in that healing process. And we'll talk about why that's important as we move later on through this. And I think it was Michaela who said for gout, and I put decreased uric acid here in regards to the hepatic stress. So not that this is something that affects so many of our clients, but with our clientele, we will often, maybe not so often, but from time to time, we'll get somebody with gout, and this can cause decreased levels of uric acid, which we found in this resistance training study. These results do vary. So it looks like it's more of a robust effect with the pill form rather than tart cherry juice itself, but those results are kind of different. It looks like the juice kind of peaks it a little bit, or possibly because they do have gout, that it peaks naturally from the inflammation that's caused from exercise. But 4 hours later, we see a massive decrease as well. So it just depends on your client, which one you're going to use. And then the antioxidant properties from earlier that we talked about with aerobic play a role as well. Now, sleep, how can we benefit from tart cherry juice, or tart cherry supplementation rather, through sleep? We know that sleep plays a role in something like diabetes, hypertension, and many others. So how can we improve these symptoms, especially when it comes to metabolic syndrome, is one of the biggest things to consider here. So increased overall time in bed, faster sleep onset latency, which is the amount of time it takes to fall asleep, total sleep time, 34 to 84 minutes, sleep efficiency, so they're sleeping more without waking up. And this is going to be population dependent. And by population dependent, I mean more so age. So we see that these minutes of total sleep time that increase with age. So one study was 18 to 40-year-olds, and that was the 34-minute average. Another was 50 plus, and that was 56 minutes. And then 65 plus was this 84-minute increase. So it could be more useful in the elderly for this specific reason. And for the purpose of sleep, not taking into consideration the aerobic and resistance training slides that we just went over. When it comes to the elderly, though, something to consider. So there are low doses of melatonin in tart cherry juice. So if we have an elderly person taking melatonin or hypnotics in general, they have a 4-fold increase of risk of fall. So that's something to consider, and slowly easing them into it, and also finding out first if they've ever taken any sort of melatonin, since that is the most popular over-the-counter sleep assistant. And that's going to be one of the mechanisms for enhanced sleep, is the melatonin content in there. And we actually see a relationship between melatonin and patients with metabolic syndrome, helping with their blood pressure and overall cholesterol. This is released in the pineal gland in response to really your circadian rhythm. So the sun goes down, it starts to be released, peaks between about 3 and 4 a.m. and then starts to decrease from there. And then the sun starts coming up. From there, procyanidin, and what this does is it helps with the bioavailability of tryptophan, which can then be converted to serotonin, helps with our mood and our sleep. And there's also tryptophan in there. So kind of just a double effect of having that greater bioavailability, increasing the numbers, and then helping with our serotonin, sleep, and mood. Something that can inhibit that, though, is IDO. IDO is released in response to inflammation. And what this does is it starts a degradation process of tryptophan. But tart cherry juice decreases that IDO. So it also reduces the inflammation associated with IDO and then allows us to have that greater bioavailability of tryptophan to help us fall asleep. Sports performance. So there were 2 studies in soccer players. One showed no effects and one showed very positive effects. So the first one looked at 1 day of supplementation. And if we go back through the other studies, they are essentially all 10-day studies with a week of supplementation prior, the day of, and then 2 weeks following. This was just pre and post match, and that was it. And they saw no effects in performance and different performance parameters that they tested. So this could be something, and when we think about our clientele, will they have that adherence to it, that we need a longer scale of supplementation to see those full effects. A second study did take those 10 days, and they saw improvements in agility, vertical jump measures, and biomarkers as well. They saw a decrease in interleukin 6 and C-reactive protein. Another study looked at water polo players. And this was super interesting because there were no effects in any way on inflammation markers, performance, nothing. But if you think about that compared to the 2 sports on the right here, a water-based compared to a land-based sport might have less of an inflammatory effect due to their weight being a little more supported in the water. If we look at volleyball, we look at soccer, well, when they're running, jumping, changing direction, the ground reaction forces are 3 to 10 times their body weight, depending on what they're doing, compared to, again, the water where their weight is more supported and there might not be that muscle damage that causes that inflammatory response. A lot of researchers do suggest that multi-day events are the best way to go when it comes to sport performance. So the anthocyanin that we see in tart cherry juice, it peaks at about 2 hours and then is washed out by about 8 hours. So in most studies, they're taking these twice a day. So once earlier in the day, once later in the day. So if we have those antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effects, and a sport like volleyball, depending on the organization, the level, you might be playing 8 to 9 games in one weekend. So having that to hopefully be less sore for the next game can be a real game changer there. Cardiovascular and clinical health. So what do we see from supplementation of tart cherry juice? Lower systolic blood pressure. We also see lower diastolic, but it's not as prevalent, but systolic really across the board has been lower. Decreased LDL and total cholesterol, lower mean arterial pressure, varied glucose levels. This depends on the population. And it's weird because an at-risk population of pre-diabetic seems to lower levels in some way, but then we've also seen hypertensive go up in blood glucose levels. So it really depends on the population, who's at risk, and what is the exact benefit that you're looking for within those. And to be safe, if someone's pre-diabetic, maybe start that slowly and see how their levels change. Improve WOMAC scores. This is for osteoarthritis. This looking at their pain and different levels of really how they're feeling overall, and then decreases symptoms of fibromyalgia. And the mechanism, right back to our anthocyanins, for our blood pressure, it actually helps stimulate smooth muscle, which in the end is going to help decrease plaque buildup and just overall vascularity of the vessels. Then when we go down to our WOMAC scores and fibromyalgia, it's that anti-inflammatory property that's really decreasing that pain and helping them out there. So forms, dosages, and food labels. I've talked about tart cherry juice, concentrate, and a powder form. When we're looking at juice, we're looking at 2 doses of 8 ounces or 240 milliliters per day. A few of these studies varied, but this is the most common and consistent. Tart cherry concentrate, 30 milliliters twice a day. It's often diluted with 100 to 220 milliliters of water. And the soccer study, where they only did 1 day of dosing, they did 60 milliliters both times of tart cherry concentrate. So it's kind of something to consider that, again, it's not maybe a one-time thing, but we have to have some adherence to taking it daily. The pill was once daily. There was one study where they actually did twice a day, but once a day seems to have some good effects at 480 milligrams. Again, 10-day supplementation was kind of the standard for testing. If we're looking to take this for the purpose of sleep, 1 to 2 hours before sleep is recommended, probably closer to 2 hours if you actually look at the time it takes for everything to peak in the blood. And for that reason, 2 hours prior to an event, so a sporting event specifically, a run, a race, a workout session, because those anthocyanins are going to take 2 hours to peak in that blood, and that'll carry on again, I said, for 8 hours. So it'll be high in that blood until that workout is finished. Food labels are a key. And just like if you see, we've all seen like wheat bread, right? And it's like if it just says wheat bread, it just has to be a certain percentage of wheat. If you put 100% on it, it actually has to be 100%. And that same thing is going to apply here. We want to make sure it's 100% tart cherry juice. I put an ingredient label for one of the tart cherry juices that I actually use with one of my teams, and it's just tart cherry juice. That's it. No other additives included in there. All right, so now time for a breakout session. So Vince is 44 years old. Sorry, I'm totally covering that thing. All right, Vince is 44 years old and new to resistance training. He is on a program consisting of 3 full body lifts per week and gets his workouts in at night after work. Vince is an engineer who works long hours, about 12 hours a day, and eats out regularly to save time. He takes over-the-counter supplements sometimes to help with sleep. He's also pre-diabetic. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into a breakout room for 10 minutes. We're going to have 10 different groups. Maddie and I are going to pop into your groups and tell you whether you're making an argument for Vince to take it or for Vince not to take it. So you're going to know that that is strictly the point that you're taking. It's not half and half. That whole group is coming up with just that scenario of for or against. You're going to come back after 10 minutes and have 1 minute to present your conclusion on your for or against, depending on where we put you. The person that's going to talk about your conclusion and present your thoughts is going to be the person that is newest to Future, so that we could get to know you a little bit more as a person. And bonus points, if anyone knows who I'm referencing with Vince as a 44-year-old, it actually doesn't have much to do with his actual bio. So we will get to that.
You're good to go, Kyle.
Thank you. All right, so welcome back from our breakout session. So we're ready to hear from everyone. So give me group number 1 and tell me what you guys came up with.
All right, I believe I'm group number 1. I'm Lexi. So we think Vince should take tart cherry juice after his long work day and prior to his workout, for multiple reasons. Number 1, because he's pre-diabetic. It's going to help regulate his blood sugar levels. And number 2, to help him sleep after his workout and to obviously help him recover since he's relatively new to working out.
Awesome. Give me group number 6 and tell me why Vince shouldn't be taking tart cherry juice.
What's up? Yeah, so we don't think Vince should be taking tart cherry juice because he is only lifting 3 days a week. He's not a high level athlete who needs fast recovery or fast strength gains, muscle gains, all that good stuff. And since he is pre-diabetic, he should be focusing on diet and exercise first and foremost before leaning on a supplement. And also he's already taking a sleep supplement. So that is why we think he should not be taking it.
Awesome. Killed that, Haley. Great job, Haley. And 6, and thank you, Lexi, as well. Give me team number 2 and why he should be taking it.
Yeah, so we think he should be taking it. More natural than some of the supplements. We think he should stop some of his supplements right now to help with his sleep aid, even some of the diabetic responses as well. He is working out 3 times a week, so to help with his recovery as well. And he's got a stressful life. He's working 12 hours a day, so hopefully try to cut down on some of that cortisol response as well as a buffer for that. And so that's why we think he should be taking it.
Great job. Awesome. Group number 7.
Well, given that Haley pretty much took all of our answers,
Yeah,
just
you really
kind of echo what she
got all
said.
that.
She kind of knocked all of them out the park. So basically, same thought process as hers.
Oh, come on. We didn't get anything else. Give me something. Dig deep.
I mean, it was primarily just based on, obviously, if you're going to give a guy a bunch of sugar who's in pre-diabetic state, probably not the best idea for his fasting or his resting blood glucose. And then given the given his lower training status. Jesus, hold on a sec.
Awesome. Thank you. Group number 3, please.
All right, group 3. We were saying Vince should take the Tart cherry predominantly to manage his sleep and his stress with the cortisol levels. We all know sleep's a big one. And worst case scenario, placebo effect is pretty powerful. So if he thinks it will help, it could potentially help.
Awesome. Group number 8.
We think that Vince does not need it. Everyone already mentioned most of it, but just to reiterate on one point, there's a lot of better, more impactful, lower hanging fruits. Like for example, when he goes out to eat, ordering more vegetables, that'd probably make a little bit more of a difference than adding in more sugar.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you for expanding on that as well. Group number 4, please.
Okay, so we think that he should take it. And of course, there are the points already mentioned about reducing inflammation, helping with his sleep, given his schedule and his health conditions. But some things that weren't mentioned is that it offers a lot of potential benefits for very little effort on his part with his busy workday. And then with the concern about blood sugar and diabetes, we talked about that too, and thought that he would benefit from taking it more in pill form.
Awesome. Group number 9.
We argued against Vince taking a Tart cherry supplementation, seeing as he's new to resistance training, and if he has an excellent future coach, he's probably not getting killed the first couple weeks. So adding something extra in for recovery probably isn't necessary. Building off what everyone else said, we put a lot of focus into healthier habits around sleep, stress reduction, and hopefully getting into working out would also improve his sleep naturally.
Awesome. Those are good points. Thank you. Group number 5.
That's you, Garrett. Sorry, I was on mute. Okay, so after speaking with him about possibly reducing his workload and mitigating stress that way, we were for Tart cherry juice in moderation, very slowly adding it to his diet since he is pre-diabetic, and hoping that it would help reduce his need for dependency on sleep medication, like previously mentioned.
Awesome. Thank you, Garrett. And group number 10 to close us out.
Well, basically what everyone else already said, but so we said his young training age, he probably didn't need it, only 3 times a week. The fact that he's pre-diabetic, obviously, so the more sugar. And then one of the sleep component, we talked about how the study that you mentioned said like take 1 to 2 hours before sleep, but this guy's working 12-hour days, coming home and working out. Like, when's he gonna take that? Like, it sounds like he's just coming home, working out and crashing. So we didn't think it would really benefit his sleep as much as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And great job. I wrote down some responses myself, and you guys literally hit all of them on the head. And I think the most important thing here is, I made you pick for or against, and there's probably all different opinions that you could take to go all around. And even for this one theoretical client, there were so many reasons for or against. So you really need to know your client in this case and kind of understand the different mechanisms of why it could or maybe couldn't benefit them. Like we brought up, not needing a new supplement when we just started, and some people might kind of want that supplement right away. And then you could kind of talk them through the different mechanisms and why it might be important later. Or according to sleep, giving them that little detail of if you're working late, well, maybe we don't need this so late because it's going to take a while to peak. While as for someone, maybe they work out in the morning and we could put that to later at night and it could benefit them more. So great job, everyone. And thank you for your participation. So alternatives. Some people simply don't like the taste of this. And some people hear, oh, cherry juice, I'm on it. And then they don't understand that it's Tart cherry juice. It has that sour taste. So how can we still get some of the benefits at least with some different choices? Well, our berries here, red beets and red cabbage, all contain those anthocyanins that we talked about. One thing to note is that if you cook anything, you're going to cook that out. So best form is raw, like in a salad or anything like that. And then if we're looking at blood pressure and just attenuating some of that pain and muscle soreness, beetroot juice can be useful as well, though some people don't like that taste, but it's also just an alternative for some of the similar benefits. My apologies.
All good.
All right, so missing areas of research. And Eddie actually asked me before we went into the breakout room, does an antioxidant intake limit your potential for skeletal muscle hypertrophy? And I talked about how the anthocyanins are going to kind of limit inflammatory pathways, specifically COX-2, which is similar to NSAIDs, which will limit both COX-1 and COX-2. There's plenty of studies for it inhibiting hypertrophy, and we'll go back to antioxidants rather than anti-inflammatories. But a lot of these studies reference these super maximal doses of antioxidants, which isn't the case in the tart cherry juice. So specifically for hypertrophy with tart cherry supplementation is something that needs to be seen. And if, I just referenced somebody maybe working out in the morning and taking it at night, well, if there is any sort of blunting of the inflammation response, well, if we take that later, do we kind of negate that and see better results? But there's no studies looking at any cross-sectional area of muscle or anything like that. 1 versus 2 dosages, it's pretty tough to get somebody, especially Gen Pop, to focus on taking this 2 times a day. So the pill might be a better way to go. Some people actually really like the taste, so maybe they do want to do it, but will the dose in the middle of the day, especially somebody like Vince who's working 12 hours, are they going to get tired from the tart cherry juice itself? And can we benefit from maybe 1 big dosage at the end of the day? And is there a dose response? And maybe instead of lasting for 8 hours in the bloodstream, it lasts a little longer from that dosage, but that's something that remains to be seen. And then supplement intake timing. When should we take it? And I talked about 1 to 2 hours before bed, 2 hours before an event. But again, somebody in the middle of the day, is that going to make them tired? And can that in turn, if somebody's kind of sensitive to it, will that decrease athletic performance? So I think the timing is super key. And Maddie, are you able to put the poll out for me?
I am on it. It is launched.
All right. So which potential outcome from tart cherry supplementation would lead to the highest level of adherence with your future clients? Feel free to take a minute and look through your clients and actually think which one would actually my clients feel was the best to be most adherent to taking it. I knew some people were going to pick the one about Josh. The IG daily deposit, it gets people working on the daily. I'll give you guys 30 more seconds. Feel free to look at your clients and kind of assess, do some thinking on it. Great. So we got the majority going for general recovery and decreased soreness. Josh got 9%. Congrats on that, my guy. Other, we have 1 person putting other. Who put other? And feel free to chime in and let me know what you were thinking.
Yeah, that was me, OG. That was on accident. I tried to click Josh.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for your honesty. All right. Well, again, this was kind of looking at you guys. And since this is for our clients, what do your clients see most important about this? And there was just so much on that general recovery and decreased soreness. So it's great to see that. And sleep would have been my second as well. So moving on from there, we can get rid of that, Maddie. References, if anyone wants to go back into this and check those out. And thank you everyone for your participation. This was awesome to see everyone getting involved. Do we have any questions?
I have a question. So kind of going back to what Eddie said, at what point do we say that inflammation is a good thing and that actually like stunting that inflammation can potentially have some detrimental effects?
Mm-hmm. So general inflammation immediately post is going to be a good thing because we're getting a response to heal. So at what point is blunting that going to be detrimental? There's really just not enough on that in regards to like this supplement in its own, but also, like I said, they put super maximal doses in there. So it's not inherently clear and they don't often take the timing. They more so just take this general dosage and cross-sectional area and make that relationship rather than taking blood markers and how they peak, which is probably a little more difficult to actually analyze. So I don't have a whole necessary answer, but I know it's often postulated that we just want to get antioxidant intake as far away from the lift as possible. And since this is good for sleep, which is one of the main benefits, well, maybe we get them to work out a little earlier and take it at night, and hopefully that doesn't blunt that response. But again, there's not so much research, and even a lot of the research too, there's some that says it blunts the skeletal muscle hypertrophy, but there's also a good amount that shows no effect. So there's no definitive answer on the actual total effect that it's having, not even the really time for anything to take effect.
Kyle, in those the strength-based studies, was it just that one-time workout and then they rated their soreness? Was it a progression over time? And as addendum, is there any like look at tart cherry juice as terms of like does it improve performance and like a strength or power? I mean, obviously it helped with endurance.
Yeah, so it did help with retainment of strength. So it doesn't say directly, well, now they went and, you know, their bench was 10% more the next study. But you can infer that theoretically they'd be able to lift a little more and increase that volume load overall. For the studies, I know in the single leg and single arm studies, they did a 2-week washout period. So it was a 10-day protocol where they supplemented 7 days before, the day of, and 2 days after. And then they did a 2-week wash. And since it was single leg, single arm, they did one arm/leg 1 week and then the other after the 2-week washout period. So they compared between clients and between arms. And one side had the placebo, one side had the tart cherry juice. So all subjects had both supplements at some point, but it was blinded, so they didn't know which they had. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and then as an addendum to that, across the studies, is there any efficacy for one form of tart cherry juice supplementation over another? Like, is powdered better? I mean, assuming that like they have the full component and the same structures, like concentrate better than a straight juice or something along those lines.
And you hit it on the head if everything's comparable. And when I talked about concentrate, I talked about wanting to make sure that you get the skins in there as well, because that contains high levels of the anthocyanin. So if all is equal, there's no real evidence of one over the other. But I would argue that if we're working with clients, and especially we have plenty of clients who, like Vince, work 12 hours a day, that once a day pill they're going to adhere to that much more than twice a day, 8 ounces of this. It's like, I don't want to measure this out. I don't want to take the time to go get it. So that I would recommend the pill in that case, but it's also client dependent. Thank you, Jacob.
Just really quick, if you don't mind, do you know what the N was, the number of subjects for those early studies that you referenced for the aerobic performance?
Mm-hmm. One was, it was a small, that was 12. The other was 26. I can message you after those exact numbers.
Would you still recommend it to any type of client if they do have the regular intake of vegetables and fruits, because it has been shown to get the same amount of anthocyanin on a daily basis if you do take in the recommended amount of servings of vegetables and fruits? So therefore the tart cherry juice wouldn't really add a benefit, or do you think it would add a benefit no matter what?
Great question. So if somebody's getting the full amount, you want them to focus on that whole diet. So a lot of times people get a supplement and even like a protein shake after a workout. It's like, I don't know why I'm not putting muscle on. I take a protein shake after the workout. Well, what did you eat the rest of the day? So it's really going to be your full diet that's going to have the biggest effect rather than just one time taking something throughout the day. So I would say that whole diet, but this can't hurt you to take more because as I talked about, there were no side effects other than that one subject who went out for GI distress. All right, well, we're at time. So if anyone has any more questions, feel free to stay on or shoot me a message on Slack. Thank you all again for coming and for your participation.